Thank you, Deputy President. Acting President. Acting President, I'm pleased to speak on Dr Ratnam's bill to legislate a target to eliminate homelessness by 2030, and I welcome any opportunity to highlight decades of neglect and shortcomings in this space. It's a partnership of failure. The federal government, which continues to support policies that are adding to the rampant unaffordability of housing, and the state government, which has an unfortunately truly atrocious record when it comes to public housing, and I say public housing investment. As a matter of fact, prior to the pandemic, Victoria had the lowest proportion of public housing per capita compared to any other Australian state. While this government has wasted tens of billions of dollars on freeway blowouts and transport projects worthy of an episode from the TV series Utopia, waiting lists for housing have grown and grown. Recently, the government tried to do something about it with the Social Housing Growth Fund. Sadly, it soon transpired that this was a wolf in sheep's clothing. While taxing the profit-rich development industry, it came with backroom deals to deliver even more fast-tracking and super profits to developers in return. It also put the burden on local councils. It was subsequently shelved and we're back to square one. Public housing investment shouldn't come with strings attached. It must happen, and it must happen urgently. Now, it's been pleasing to see that the government has belatedly begun to address the issue with their big build social housing spend, 12,000 new dwellings, and I congratulate them. Yes, it's doing something. But it is shameful that today our public housing waiting list has now ballooned to more than 100,000 people. If you don't have access to secure housing, you are disadvantaged in every single aspect of life, which Ms Patton did cover. And it's truly sad that we're letting so many people down. That's why I wholeheartedly commend the component of this bill that seeks to recognise housing as a human right. Housing is essential for survival, and we need to recognise this. It should not be treated as an investment vehicle. And I find most of this bill praiseworthy, but with one caveat, and it will likely come as no surprise to many in this chamber. This bill creates a solution which involves the equivalent of cleaning up a spill without addressing the leak. We're never going to fully alleviate this problem without addressing something which is at the root of all this, the elephant in the room, and that is rapid population growth. Now, that's something that I'm sure is not addressed in many of the inquiries. But much can be said about how rapid population growth has exceeded the capabilities of our infrastructure, and that's happened with our health services, our ambulance response times, our roads, and yes, our housing. Housing unaffordability can be explained with simple economics. Demand has outstripped supply. In the 14 years to 2018, Melbourne's population growth has led the nation, adding over 1.3 million people with a net increase of 36% over the last 14 years. Two-thirds of that growth has come from massively expanded immigration programs. As a result, Melbourne's become Australia's fastest growing city in population every single year from 2004 to 2018. In a unique coincidence, Melbourne's house prices have also jumped 36%, but that is in fewer than 3 years, 36% in 3 years. And as home prices skyrockets, so do rents as landlords seek to claw back the costs of their property. And so we see people being forced out onto the streets, including middle-aged women and people from all walks of life. If our population continues to grow at this rate, so too will our public housing waiting lists, and so too will property prices continue to increase as demand further overtakes supply. It's simple economics, and it doesn't have to be this way. I have no doubt that this bill, if passed, will be very beneficial, but it's not quite there without touching on the lack of a population policy. No population policy. The only policy is more and more as quickly as possible. And I'd like to return to that point of secure housing, because more secure housing must be a human right. But to give people secure housing, we need to move away from this developer-led model of social housing. Social housing is beholden to developers and private companies, leaving tenants exposed to potential rent rises and collapse of said companies. And I'm glad that Dr. Ratnam has gone to that point and supports the same point of view on this issue. Traditional public housing is the best way for giving people secure and affordable accommodation, but our government would rather farm out the essential provision of housing to third parties in order to wipe their hands of any responsibility. The Renters and Housing Union described public housing as the gold standard, and it's not hard to see why. It's time for the government to take some accountability over this issue. While we're looking to alleviate and subsequently eliminate homelessness, I'd like to remind the House of my motion last year calling on the government to crack down on foreign ownership, fix Victoria's failure of a vacant housing tax regime, strengthen our embarrassingly lax money laundering laws in the property industry. All of these issues are only adding to housing unaffordability crisis. And there's obviously more systemic issues at play, but these are in the hands of the federal government, as Mr Atkinson also alluded to. I support the bill. I congratulate Dr Ratnam, but would strongly urge Dr Ratnam, this House and the government to give serious consideration to the role of population growth and its obvious contribution to the homelessness crisis and to the other issues I identified. Thank you.
Thank you.